Opening the center claims early space and prepares swift development. Immediately contesting central influence, knight boldly sprints out, preparing to launch into the game's complex dance. Asserting central space with c4 immediately challenges black's knight's dominion and sets up a powerful pawn structure. Solidifying the center and preparing to develop the bishop, this choice opens avenues for queenside play while respecting white's initial pawn push. Developing another knight rapidly increases central influence and prepares for kingside castling. Developing the bishop to pin the knight immediately creates dynamic tension, challenging white's central pawn structure. Unleashing queen pressure, white immediately challenges the bishop's positional compromise, forcing black to clarify its intentions. Developing a piece to challenge white's queen and increase central influence here makes sense. Solidifying central control and preparing kingside castling, this move elegantly addresses multiple positional requirements simultaneously. Securing the monarch is a wise priority, bringing the king to a safe haven and preparing for future central operations. Unbalancing black's harmony, white seeks to disrupt the bishop's influence and potentially exploit weakened squares. Exchanging bishops here offers a temporary material gain, but it significantly eases white's pawn structure and grants them a dominant queen. Recapturing with the queen immediately exposes it to potential harassment, creating dynamic play. Challenging white's queen while repositioning the knight opens up possibilities for tactical skirmishes. Recapturing with the queen reclaims central influence, but opens a potential line of attack for black's knight. Unleashing central pawn pressure now simplifies and forces white's queen to a less active square, potentially opening lines for black's pieces. Fortifying the kingside and preparing for potential castling, this move aims to enhance king's safety. Expanding the queenside pawn structure initiates a pawn chain, aiming to seize central space and possibly open diagonals for bishop activity. Liberating the c-file, this capture aims to exploit the slightly awkward placement of black's queen. Unlocking the c-file for the rook opens fresh attacking avenues as black solidifies their central pawn structure. Developing the bishop to a more active diagonal, this piece aims to support the central pawn structure and potentially pressure black's kingside. Unveiling the queen to connect rooks and prepare for central pawn advances, subtly challenging white's queenside space. Safeguarding the monarch, white tucks it away while preserving development. Unleashing the bishop's diagonal influence, this maneuver reestablishes piece harmony and prepares for central advances. A daring knight sortie, aiming to disrupt black's cozy development by exploiting the open kingside and potentially creating imbalances. Recuperating the bishop's diagonal creates a more harmonious pawn structure, preparing for queenside expansion. Solidifying central control and preparing a knight's redeployment to the kingside, this move subtly aims for a more harmonious piece setup. Recentralizing the rook unlocks the e-file, creating potential pressure and a solid defensive outpost on the third rank. Asserting control over the c-file now allows white to probe black's queen's flank and potentially disrupt their coordination. Consolidating the bishop's retreat fortifies the queenside and prepares for potential piece redistribution. Repositioning the rook to c2 aims to contest the c-file and offers potential support for a future advance, subtly restricting black's knight. This prepares to reclaim the queenside initiative by threatening to open the file, potentially disrupting white's pawn structure. Challenging black's pawn structure, this move fights for queenside initiative and potential expansion. Initiating pawn break on the queenside now offers dynamic counterplay, potentially opening lines for the queen and bishop. Pushing the pawn boldly aims to restrict black's queenside expansion and gain breathing room on the queenside. Asserting control of the open queenside files with this knight maneuver, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure. Reinforcing the queenside pawn structure, white aims to solidify their queenside presence and restrict black's minor piece mobility. This pawn thrust aggressively challenges white's queenside pawn structure and aims to open lines for black's pieces. repositioning the queen to target potential weaknesses on the queen side, opening up lines for pieces. Shifting the queen to d6 activates the bishop on f5 and prepares for potential central breaks, creating a more dynamic position. Opening the b-file creates immediate pressure, aiming to disrupt black's queenside structure and potentially exploit the weakened pawns. Liberating the knight to d6 opens up a dynamic queenside initiative for black. Knight repositioning for central control or king's flank pressure, aiming to exploit the weakened queenside pawn structure. Unleashing the knight to a strong outpost, threatening white's center and creating tactical possibilities. Repositioning the rook to the c-file fortifies control and prepares for potential exchanges, creating a more dynamic battlefield. Unlocking the queenside pawn chain with b5 aims to disrupt white's piece mobility and create counterplay. Opening the queenside diagonal offers tactical possibilities, but be wary of potential piece activity on the now exposed b-file. Seizing the open bishop's diagonal creates immediate threats along the queenside and opens lines for counterplay. Preparing to double rooks on the e-file, aiming to exploit the potentially exposed black king. Intensifying the kingside attack by clearing a path for the queen is a bold gamble. Aimed at disrupting black's queenside pawn structure, this aggressive advance seeks to exploit potential weaknesses and gain diagonal influence. Defending the king by anchoring the pawn allows the rook to potentially participate in the queenside action more effectively. Recapturing the knight with this piece reestablishes central presence and opens a pathway for rook activity along the c-file. Unlocking the bishop pair's potential, this capture opens up the c-file and challenges white's central pawn structure. Securing the bishop's influence on the central diagonal, white aims to control key squares and prepare for further central advances. Unleashing the rook to the 6th rank aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and create attacking possibilities on the king side. Unleashing a devastating queen sacrifice to shatter the enemy's pawn structure and expose their monarch.